Wedgwood was both a very magnetic and engaging individual, but he was also, in a sort of Steve Jobs almost kind of way, an obsessive perfectionist. And he was known as Old Wooden Leg because he lost his leg and he would storm through the pot bank on his wooden leg with his stick, smashing ware that didn't meet the right quality threshold. He was hard as hell. He wanted to be the master potter to the universe. And he, time and again, made sure that his workers were working to his level of perfection. When we think of the decorative arts of Britain, we immediately turn to Josiah Wedgwood, who helped to design Britain, a change maker and a taste maker. Josiah Wedgwood turned this rude, uncultivated craft, as it was called, into this global industry, marrying art, design, technology. And he made Stoke-on-Trent the epicenter of pottery production in the latter half of the 18th century. It was almost inevitable that he would end up in the pottery business. His father was a potter, his uncles, but there was a genius about Wedgwood. He had seen so many businesses go bankrupt trying to create the brilliant translucent porcelain. So he produces creamware, which is a mass production pottery, which isn't as translucent, but fills the consumer market. And after a while, he feels he's sort of flooded the market with this and needs a new innovation. And so he immerses himself in the classicism of the 18th century. He studies the great Egyptian designs, which are so fashionable. He embraces Romanticism, but he's a scientist. So he goes back to the experiments, he goes back to his kilns, he goes back to looking at the ingredients of pottery. And after many trials and error, he comes up with his great innovation, one of the great innovations in ceramic production. Jasperware. So Jasperware begins as this celebrated Wedgwood blue design, which has almost the translucent qualities of porcelain, but is much more malleable and adaptable. And Wedgwood's brilliance was not only technical, but in terms of marketing, in terms of feeling the sense of where British consumer culture was going. And so he knows that to sell his material, it's very, very important to have royal patronage. And so he works incredibly hard to have Queen Charlotte support his production so that it can bear the title Queen's Ware. That means it's got the royal stamp of approval. That means being able to sell it then into mass market is much easier. If you bag the royal or the aristocrat, getting the middle market is so much easier. And so on the one hand, he wants royal patronage. And on the other hand, he was quite a radical figure. He's interested in the American Revolution. He's interested in the French Revolution. He mixed in radical circles. That brought him in touch with the campaign for the abolition of the trade in slaves. And Wedgwood immediately wanted to support the abolitionist cause. And so he supported it in the best way he knew how, which was through design. And he produces this celebrated medallion, almost like a button that today you'd wear as a kind of CND badge or a Labour Party badge. And it had the depiction of an African slave in chains saying, "Am I not a man and a brother?" in Jasperware. And this was mass-produced. This was worn by those who supported the abolitionist cause, and it became a great icon. Every button we see today for campaigns against Make Poverty History or Me Too or whichever cause, in terms of the material culture of that, I think you can see an enormous debt to Wedgwood's medallion, Am I Not a Man and a Brother? And Wedgwood was very proud of that. It was another mark in his dominance of decorative arts. One of the great fads in the 1770s, 1780s was a new desire for vases. Everyone needed a vase. Some of that is bound up with the rediscovery of Italy and Greece, the impulse that would produce Lord Elgin and the Parthenon sculptures coming back to Britain. So there was a fashionability about archaeology, about the rediscovery of the classical inheritance. One of these great icons was the Portland Vase, which was dug up and comes back to Britain and goes to sit in the British Museum. And it was called the Portland Vase because it was owned by the Duke of Portland. And it was regarded as the most beautiful item within the classical tradition. And so for Wedgwood, here was the greatest challenge of all. Could he make a modern Portland vase? Could he make a ceramic vase from Stoke-on-Trent to rival the great classical production of the past? And so he set himself to do it. And it was a tortuous process. But what emerged from it was this testament to all of his technical proficiency and skills. And it became a great celebrity moment to see the vase. And it was a ticketed item to go and see this phenomenal piece. And it elevated Wedgwood's success. He was on his pathway now to being the master potter, to being the royal potter, to being a fellow of the Royal Society, and above all, a man who helped to design Britain. When we think of the decorative arts, we immediately turn to some of the greatest ceramic production in the history of the world. And Josiah Wedgwood sits proudly and firmly within that.